feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Margin.
Are you ready to get rocked?
I'm ready to rock. Today we are reviewing oh my god,
Black Adam.
Juame Collet-Serra's
Jama.
I did it wrong. We literally before this review were like, it's Jama, it's Jama, it's Jama. We kept calling him Jam. I went Juame, which is the way that I said it at the beginning of this review. Jama Collet-Serra's Black Adam, starring the one, the only Dwayne The Rock Johnson and other people: Pierce Brosnan, Aldis Hodge, Noah Centineo, Sarah Shahi, and more. Eric, how are you? We got to see the man, the myth, the legend in person.
We did, Matt, and that will be a whole conversation onto itself, I think.
Got this cool lenticular collectible ticket,
so we can prove that we were there for the night the Rock rocked Toronto or Canada or whatever, or Black Adam rocks Canada. We'll talk about that more in our experience with the overall sort of event but also I think there will be a conversation to have with the screening that we were, or the IMAX screening that we were attending as well.
We can bring that a little bit here, but we'll focus on the movie here. It will be completely spoiler free. So this is our spoiler free on embargo review. I think we will be doing a spoiler conversation. I don't know like if it's going to be a gigantic one, but I think there are some things that we can touch on from a spoiler perspective in a spoiler cast. So we will be doing a spoiler cast as well, which you can check out probably after the movie is released. But today, spoiler free thoughts on Black Adam. We'll focus on that, and then we'll talk about the event over on our Black Adam Rocks Untitled episode 135 of the Untitled Movie Podcast, where Eric and I will talk about the event. We'll probably talk about the Creed 3 trailer. We'll talk about Harrison Ford joining the MCU and different things. But today, we're focusing on the movie, 15 years in the making, Black Adam.
Yeah, so Black Adam is what you would kind of expect from The Rock, where it's matching both his personality and his image that he's created over the decades. It very much feels like he's bringing the Attitude Era into the hierarchy of the DC universe with this character. And essentially, the log line is Teth Adam, as he's known, or the Man in Black, is brought into our time, originally an ancient demigod from 5,000 years previously, is brought back or is brought into the modern world, into the Middle Eastern city known as Kondak. And with that comes this incredible power and strength that will rival many of
Superman,
the DC characters that we've come to know and love, I guess, in terms of the DCEU.
We loved in some of them in the comics, but
yeah, and in other movies that are not DCEU related. But essentially, you have Johnson reteaming with Jama Collet-Serra, who they previously just worked together on Jungle Cruise, which was another kind of big budget studio movie. There's more personality here than a Zack Snyder DCEU movie, but
enough
still
slow-mo to make him blush, baby.
It still succumbs to the sheer weight, I think, of the running time and specifically
and what
kind
came
of like
before it.
Yeah, and the gaudy excess of it all. Like I think that part of this film that I was hoping for was it would kind of go off the rails a little bit from what Zack Snyder had created, and for the most part it doesn't, which is unfortunate, even though there are some kind of fun nods to, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and music cues from the Rolling Stones and Smashing Pumpkins that are kind of like, okay, that is very much Jama Collet-Serra, interjecting a little bit of character into, this franchise and sort of rebooting it, I guess, from, the stance of bringing in, Dwayne Johnson to be, the head of the hierarchy in this, and playing with it. The best part of this whole movie, or the most kind of intelligent aspect of it is how it kind of frames the US in using the Justice Society, which is not to be confused with the Justice League, as almost as like they are the UN, and that it's kind of looking at it from the point of view of a geopolitical angle that, this Middle Eastern city in this, fictional country needs help, and they've never gotten any response from North America in any capacity whatsoever. But as soon as Black Adam appears and becomes a threat, they're there. And the Intergang is the other kind of major villain that kind of is, coming in and using up all the resources and what have you. And the film does make a point to call out the Justice Society and America for not doing anything in terms of being, a geopolitical partner and helping those in need. And I think that really does have a moment there that is biting and satirical, but also making a really good point. And then the film kind of succumbs to, as you mentioned, a lot of slow motion, a lot of people punching and fighting, a typical third act showdown with
DCEU
CGI.
laser in the sky kind of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think there's some stuff in there that I think is interesting, and I think overall it's a mildly enjoyable superhero movie. Which, even before the movie was starting, you heard some people talk about, which I think were the guys that we'll talk about later, saying that The Rock always brings a 7 and a 7.5 when he makes movies. Like, he's just that perfectly palatable kind of like
straight down the middle.
easy watch. Like, they're usually entertaining but nothing more, and I think that's kind of what you're getting in this movie. Like, um I'm with you. I think we both kind of like Jaume Collet-Serra because he brings kind of this off-kilter kind of weirdness to his movies. It's either like weirdly funny, or the music choices are out there, and all those things you kind of already brought up.
Or
And I
set
think
pieces as well, right?
set
Like, I
yeah
think his set pieces are, like, you look at what he was doing with, House of Wax and Orphan, and even before he started working with Liam Neeson, there was a lot of craftsmanship in certain set pieces that was like, oh, that was unexpected how ambitious that was and well executed in terms of the direction.
Unexpected is a perfect term, and I think there are a few of those scattered throughout the movie, and I think that's the stuff that works best. Is like, I think the stuff where you go, oh, that's clearly a genre thing that he put into this movie, right? And we were kind of talking after the screening, going of like, is some of that stuff, is it meant to be satirical? Is
Was
it
it
meant to
trolling
be,
the
yeah, like,
DCEU?
is it kind of poking fun at it with its overuse of slow motion, and it's kind of paint by numbers, thin kind of standard superhero plot and things like that. Like, I think it is interesting that The Rock's been for 15 years trying to get this movie made, and it's a character obviously he really wanted to make a movie of, and he's been talking about how the hierarchy of power of the DC universe is about to change over and over and over again. And you know what? For the most part, it is just a DCEU movie. I think like it's maybe on the middle to upper tier of those movies because it's not necessarily a high bar to pass. I don't think it's as interesting as something like James Gunn's The Suicide Squad or Peacemaker or something like that is very much in this world, but I think is its own thing, and actually even has a little bit more to say, or has some more interesting choices, or is more entertaining. But this, there are those moments you already brought up, most of them with the music choices, or the good, the bad, and the ugly sequence and stuff, which is clearly a Juame thing. And like, even with some of it, the way that Black Adam just takes out his enemies and things like that, like there is some weirdly funny, dark moments throughout the whole thing that will both have you laughing. I don't know if it's with it or
Or
at
at
it.
it?
Yeah, and I think that's where I struggled, whereas, like, I didn't have a bad time. Like, I laughed pretty frequently throughout. I think it overstays its welcome. It's just shy or just over 2 hours. And I felt like for the first hour, I was kind of on its wavelength where I'm like, okay, Jaume's probably kind of poking fun at this a little bit, but also having fun with it. The Rock controls the screen like he always does. Like, he is a charismatic guy, and I think he's perfect to play a superhero or an anti-hero. But even that, like when you go anti-hero, superhero, like it's very much like, well, he does the things that Superman won't do, and he's a bad guy, but he fights for Kondak, and like it's like, well, he's ultimately just, it's the same classic anti-hero thing where he's ultimately just a hero at the end of the day, and it's going to be hard to see him as a villain against either Shazam or Superman or whoever in the future. And it ends up just being a pretty standard superhero movie. Like, it's a pretty thing we've seen a million times before. Pretty connect the dots from A to B to C. Yeah, okay, he kills people. There's some weird humor in there. The Rock is the Rock, and like it's not a bad time, but it is pretty much something I've seen at this point over and over and over again. And I don't necessarily think it's doing anything to either elevate the superhero movie or do anything differently. It's just pretty much a okay superhero movie. And that's pretty much what you get, with some weird elements here and there. And I don't really have all that much more to say, and I'm sure we will when we go into spoilers and talk about specific moments and things like that. And I do agree with you of the commentary on how the United States treats some of these nations
The
that,
UN is as well,
yeah, and the UN
specifically.
as
Yeah.
well. But the Justice Society, like, I think it's both. Again, I can't tell if any of it's intentional or not, but when you use characters like Doc Savage and
Doc Savage?
sorry, not
Dr.
Doc
Fate.
Savage. We were talking about
Yeah, because The Rock
is going to
was
do,
also developing Doc Savage with
yeah,
Shane Black around the
that's what I
same
was thinking of.
time, and he's
Doc
been
Fate, sorry.
yeah. So Dr. Fate, who's played by Pierce Brosnan in the most affectless performance you've ever seen. Like, any time that he says the
I
crown
laughed
of
at him a lot.
Sabak,
Yeah.
it is
The
amazing.
crown of Sabak.
It's incredible. But yeah, part of you when you're watching the movie is like, okay, this took, the narrative being, 10 to 15 years to
Yeah.
fully develop, and like The Rock wanted to make sure that it was the right time for him to come into, a comic book franchise such as this, and choosing DC over Marvel, and having the fans kind of let him or dictate what character he was going to play, because he was like, oh, should I play Shazam or should I play Black Adam, and they went with Black Adam.
Wasn't
and
there Lobo at one point? Is that
I think Lobo as well, but I don't know if that was like something that was before then. But yeah,
No
so
one
he's
wants a Lobo movie. Do
so,
they?
I
guess no one wanted a Black Adam
Guardians of
movie.
the Galaxy movie, like,
Yeah,
and look how
that's
that came.
totally fair. I totally agree with that.
I mean,
Yeah.
Spawn's coming back, so
Yeah, sure.
anything's possible. Yeah, so I think, like, when you're watching this, you're thinking to yourself, okay, what is going to separate this from the other DCEU movies, especially considering Zack Snyder leaving and the hierarchy. We keep making the joke, but it is kind of like in a free for all right now, where
There
it's
was
like,
an article that came out on the Hollywood Reporter, I believe,
Yes.
yesterday, that kind of details all that. So you guys should maybe check that out. It's interesting.
Yeah, where
for
James
sure.
Gunn is pitching a secret project. There's also stuff that isn't DCEU related, but still DC related, with Matt Reeves and the Batman,
and building out that universe, which is separate from this, and then like
yeah. And so you're going into this thinking, okay, well, if you didn't really care for the Zack Snyder Superman movies, or Batman versus Superman, which I didn't, I don't think you did either.
I think softer on them than you.
Yeah, I despise them. Just
I
for
know
the
you
record.
despise them. I despise the Whedon cut of Justice League. I think the Snyder cut of Justice League is wild, and like being in 4:3 and black, or not black and white. There is a black white version, and just being 4 hours long. And same with the director's cut of Batman v Superman, which I like more than the theatrical cut. And Man of Steel, I just don't care about Superman all that much, like as a character. I know
He's
you're
boring.
kind of in the same boat there. But I'm more indifferent than despise them, if that makes sense. Like,
right. I'm just exhausted by them, and I was exhausted by this, but I still retain some of those little moments that are kind of,
scattered
sprinkled
throughout.
throughout
Yeah.
and kind of add a little bit of a spice.
Personality.
Yeah, and I do like The Rock quite a bit as well, and I think he is a good fit for the role. The only thing that I'm not maybe the biggest fan of is that I wish he kind of went further with being an anti-hero,
Yeah, I agree.
like truly being
He's a hero throughout the whole movie. Like,
yeah, well, and that's the thing as well, like when you're bringing a character like this into the modern world where Superman and Batman and all these other characters already exist, it's really not that surprising. So the aspect that they play on is that, okay, well, he's a character, a champion for the Middle East, like he's a
Yeah.
character that is representing those, that their resources are being taken, that the people are being basically, colonized and controlled and, segregated. And so with that, that's kind of interesting, but at the same time, it's like, are we really surprised that in this world that these that Earthlings are living in, that another demigod is resurrected? It's like, okay, well, we've seen the destruction of Superman, we've seen Batman lives in Gotham, like it's not really that kind of like shocking or surprising that this character, even with Shazam around, like it's not that surprising. So
Yeah.
when you have this character come in, I think it would have been more interesting or worked a little bit better if Black Adam was the first of the DC characters to emerge on Earth, but because you already have this world in play, it kind of feels like, oh, well, it's just another
Well, I guess technically that is
character.
true 5,000 years ago, even though
Yeah,
he
I
goes
know,
into
but
a
but in
slumber.
the
But
modern world
yeah.
that we live in, we've already been
Yeah.
introduced to all these other characters. Where it's just like, oh, there's another one. Okay,
Oh, there's another Superman guy, but he's
Yeah,
like, but he's the
but he's
conduct
kind,
Superman.
but he kind
Like,
of kills people, and that's the thing.
yeah,
Like, it's like I was thinking, like, how much of The Rock is in that decision to make him kind of a likable anti-hero, where like he's still the
totally.
people's champion,
Pitbull's
and
champ. Yeah.
in a way where, like, I think if Dave Bautista played the role, like Dave Bautista is one of those guys that doesn't care about playing a villain, like he'll
No,
play.
it's all about The Rock's image, right? Like that's why I
Yeah,
think Black Adam comes off as more heroic in this. Like he never really has a villainous turn. The only anti-hero kind of stuff is that he's fighting the Justice Society. Like that's it.
yeah.
He doesn't really necessarily do anything bad. Like he's
Well, I mean, he
fight
kills people. That's kind
sure,
of
but like
the morality of that
Batman in this
character.
universe kills people. Guess what? Superman kills people in this
Yeah,
universe. So like,
even if
or
it's
at
not
least
direct. I mean, spoiler alert: he killed Zod in Man of
yeah,
Steel, but he also did so much damage to
and
the
killed
rest of
many people in
Metropolis in the
that too.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Superman is as much of a genocidal maniac as
Probably killed
Black
more
Adam.
people than
Oh,
Black Adam did.
definitely a
So
100% on that, and that's why Superman sucks. But yeah, going back to like that persona, I don't know much about Black Adam, so like I don't
neither
have
do
like
I. So maybe this is
an
exactly what the
interest
character is. Yeah.
in like being like, oh, that's how he should be
I always
portrayed or how he
thought he was the
shouldn't be
arch
portrayed.
nemesis of Shazam.
I think that
Or
that's how that they're kind of building it
yeah.
up, and that's what even The Rock was saying. Like, we need to kind of like build up these movies, and it does feel like you're watching basically a 2-hour wrestling promo in a lot of ways, where you're establishing this character. The film is long, but it also kind of has a pace of it going a mile a minute to give you backstory of Black Adam, introduce the Justice Society and all these other
That
supporting
exposition filled
characters.
opening's pretty bad.
Yeah, and again, like, it's like, is it doing that intentionally and kind of mocking what's come
I don't
before
know.
it,
I
or
don't
if
think it
or is it being
is.
sincere? Because there's both a sincerity and there's also a satirical element to it, where there are times where it does feel like almost it's on that kind of like Zucker brother kind of like plane of being an airplane movie or a Naked Gun film, where it's spoofing some of the stuff that's come before, but then it also wants to have its cake and eat it too, and play it straight, in the way that it reminded me a little bit like Kick-Ass, where Kick-Ass is trying to
Poke
kind
fun
of,
at the superhero genre, but also be a superhero movie.
yeah, subvert it, but then also become it. And then this does the same thing
I
where,
never got the parody thing because, like, I see it more, I guess, as like Fast and Furious, which The Rock is also a part of, where I think that it is so self-serious and so sincere that you can kind of
that it
turn
turns into
into that.
satirical.
And I think maybe in the future that's what Black Adam will be viewed at, except by like DCEU, like hardcore people, because I think they'll ultimately like this movie.
Yeah.
Um, And I don't think they'll see that stuff because they'll just be getting more of what they want, which is what they got in those other movies, maybe a little bit better than what they got before. It still has all that Zack Snyder slow-mo and
But you
it
can't look at an image like Hawkman
and
and
not
Aldis
laugh.
Hodge wearing the helmet, and it
Yeah,
looks so unbelievably awkward on him, and the way
I
that
know.
as as a Warner Brothers executive or a producer on this film, or even Aldis Hodge, like
Aldis Hodge is so self-serious in the movie
you
too.
can't look at those scenes where he's wearing that golden helmet, that mask, and be like, that's there is some sort of humor here, because it doesn't fit well. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, and it just looks like it's a joke. And again, that's you could look at it as both, kind of poking fun at the genre, or you could look at it as maybe just being like a, you know, a mistake, like they didn't really see a problem there, but
It
like
looks really goofy,
it
and I mean, the
does.
whole Justice Society does, right? Because when you look at them, it's hard in the
Not to
time we're
see their
at now.
Marvel counterparts
Yes,
as
and that's the
well.
thing, because I think people who have been comic fans understand that every Marvel hero kind of has a DC counterpart, right? Or vice versa, right? Whatever was created first. Um, and that's fine. But I think when you choose the members of the Justice Society and like you have Noah Centineo playing Atom Smasher, who is clearly Ant-Man, but only in his giant man
But with
form
a
kind of
Peter
thing,
Parker
right?
personality and a Deadpool mask.
Exactly. And then also down to the, oh, I inherited this from the older version of the character, which is
Uncle Al?
exactly Uncle Al, which we won't say the cameo, but it's maybe we will talk about it in the spoiler cast. But like, that's even an Ant-Man thing, which I'm sure is intentional from the comics. And I'm not saying that we don't know that, but like choosing to have Atom Smasher here, Hawkman, who like looks like Falcon, right? For the most
Yeah.
part, but with a
And
goofier
Hawkeye as
mask.
well, right?
And
In
yeah,
the original
and
comic books anyways.
yeah, and then having what
Cyclone, who kind of
Cyclone
is
is
like
like
Storm,
Storm.
and
Yeah,
then
and then
Doctor
and
Fate is basically
Doctor
like Doctor
Strange.
Strange. And then
Yeah.
going back to Atom Smasher as well, like his metabolism also kind of reminds me a little bit of the Flash, where like he always has to be eating something.
Yeah, because he burns so much. Yeah. So I think it's like I get that these are all probably iconic DC characters in their own way, maybe B tier, much like some of them were B tier in Marvel, but have become A tier because of the movies. Um, it's hard to not see that, right? Like when you see Doctor Fate doing everything, you're like, oh, he's literally Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And you're like,
He's got a
and
haunted helmet.
yeah, and it's just like it's hard not to see that. And then you go, huh,
I want the
interesting
crown of
choice. Like Pierce Brosnan, bless him, getting that paycheck. Why not? I don't know. Like it's just it's hard not to see those Marvel movies in those, and then you go to that satirical thing of going, oh, are they poking fun at those characters? And then you go, no, I think it's like pretty sincere. Like The Rock cares too much to be like to make this a joke. I think like he literally everything he's talking about is like, this movie's for the fans. Like I care so much about the DCEU or the DC universe and like all this stuff. So I don't maybe Juame is the one that kind of secretly is like, I'm not going to take this too seriously, where The Rock is taking it very seriously. And that's why you get this weird mishmash where you're like not sure if it's satirical or if it's just very straight. And then that's why it ends up kind of being a little
It clashes
confusing.
with
Yeah.
itself, and it feels like it's having this internal kind of combustion of like, okay, is this movie supposed to be playful and humorous and sort of, warping or subverting your expectations of what we've seen before, or is it also going to kind of, keep in sort of sync with what, we've come to expect from the DCEU? And there's more of what we've come to expect. Like, it's still very much a DCEU, superhuman powered movie. It's not Birds of Prey. It's not the Suicide Squad or or Peacemaker, where it's like, okay, it takes these characters and does something really interesting with them. It kind of is playing completely broad with, its technique, but then it has these tonal kind of moments or shifts where it's like, oh, that's where, like, if you've seen, Nonstop or House of Wax or Orphan, like, Jama does have a really good sense of humor, and it kind of feels like it got out more here than it did with Jungle Cruise. Um, but it's still kind of fighting against the machinery of the DCEU and just kind of the structure of what one of these movies are, and even The Rock a little bit too, because like again, like I think like The Rock acquits himself well, and I even like his confidence in the way that the character flies. Like he kind of more floats than anything else, but there is something about that his presentation of himself is so strong. But I do wonder if he like puts that much emphasis into the other actors, because again, someone like Aldis Hodge, who has been really good in movies like Clemency and The Invisible Man and One Night in Miami, here you know could you could put him in a Fast and Furious movie and he kind of would fit perfectly in that. But his performance here, while kind of being the leader of the Justice Society, kind of feels awkward and uncomfortable, and like his rapport with Pierce Brosnan doesn't really work, and you don't care about their
Yeah, there's some
friendship. It's
moments
forced.
they try to make impactful that just don't work, and
No, and again, like Brosnan is fun because it's he part of it is like, okay, this is me like making some money off of this comic book franchise and what have you, and then part of it is like it's just funny to see someone like a former James Bond in a superhero movie kind of giving a performance that is almost like it's it's almost like he's trying to play it stoic, but it's actually deadpan
yeah, yeah,
in the
yeah.
process. Like every line delivery he has, it's almost like, okay, I'm trying to match like Benedict Cumberbatch in Doctor Strange, but then ultimately it's like it's him being Austin Powers. And like it's unintentional, but it's also
Yeah.
very funny, and you're laughing at it, but you almost kind of are appreciative that Brosnan is doing it this way because it's just at least different. you know and the look of the film, like again, like I think it uses CGI at times interestingly, but then there are other moments where it's like, okay, well, we've seen this before, and it kind of feels very much in line with what has already come. And for something that is supposed to shake up the foundation of the DCEU, this really kind of just feels like, okay, well, now, The Rock might become the figurehead of this franchise, but not much else has changed aesthetically or, creatively speaking. And like maybe it's baby steps. Maybe the next phase of these movies after we get Aquaman and Aquaman 2 and Shazam 2, and then whatever the hell is happening with the Flash, once those movies have been finished, maybe then you'll start to see some more of whoever becomes the creative person running the show kind of make those decisions. Maybe The Rock will have more creative input on
Say, yeah.
other you know solo movies, not even just Black Adam, because he is an executive producer on the Shazam films as well. So it kind of feels like you're getting to that point now where it's like, okay, are you guys actually going to make any real changes to what's come before and like restart things? And we've talked about this on the regular show, and we'll talk about it again, where the DCEU plan just seems so disjointed and all over the place, where it's just like you guys don't really know what you're doing, or it seems like it's like you don't know what
Yeah,
you're
it seems
doing.
like they were gonna throw everything out the window, but then they keep including Viola Davis in these things, and
And
like,
I like
which
Viola Davis. I think
it's
she
not a
is
spoiler.
good.
That was in one of the trailers.
Yes.
Um, I, it's just, and they're very much setting this in that DCEU, and I
Well,
mean,
even
even
Jason Momoa and
yeah,
Ezra Miller, again, whatever's going on there, like they're still a part of it. Even I think even Gal Gadot, like it's like, okay, well, they're going to be in it, but now we're going to get rid of Ben Affleck's Batman and bring in
but
Michael
except when he
Keaton.
comes back sometimes, and
Yeah, so it's like, okay, so and then like are we sticking with what Zack Snyder established, or are we trying to restructure this whole thing?
but then it's like, okay, well, Matt Reeves will do his own thing over there, and then maybe we'll keep doing the DCEU over here, but we'll just kind of
And then the
change
Joker
gears
movie
and
is its
like,
own thing as well.
yeah. So you know what? I appreciate it in the sense of just going, okay, well, it can be different things. Like, and you brought up some of the best of the DCEU, which was Birds of Prey, which is the Suicide Squad, which is Peacemaker. And then I also appreciated that they were like, okay, well, there can be these offshoots where Matt Reeves' Batman is in its own thing, Joker is its own thing, and just make a good movie, right? And then, but they're each getting their own kind of universes.
And then it gets more
Um,
convoluted.
yeah, and then you're like, "Oh, we were gonna scrap all of the DCEU. Oh, wait, now we're gonna keep some of it. Okay, the Flash is gonna be the reset point where we say that Michael Keaton's now the Batman, but most of the other actors are staying. Um, but they're not going to connect, but they are going to connect now." And then it's just like, okay, okay. And it seems like they were going to throw everything out the window, but once they fired, or not fired, that guy's leaving. I forget even who the head of DC was, the films section. Um, but he got in a bunch of shit of how they treated people on Justice League and things like that too. And I don't know, man. Like it's interesting, but this to me feels like it's going to be, you know, more of the same, but I don't know. We'll see after these couple movies, like you mentioned. Like, I don't know. It seems like it's in flux a little bit. Like,
Well, even with Batgirl, right? Like it kind of feels like anything could
yeah,
happen at this point with, like even with the Michael Keaton thing again, like bringing in Tim Burton's Batman and being a part of the continuity now. It's just
yeah.
like, okay, so like anything is possible. Like I wouldn't be surprised if The Rock is even thinking to himself, okay, well, let's bring in Robert Pattinson's Batman at some point, or
I don't know if that
Joaquin
works.
Phoenix.
I
I
don't
I don't
know.
either. I don't either, but
Don't
I
just
would not
follow
be.
Marvel. That's the thing. It's
But
like I don't want to
that's
keep
what he
putting.
wants to do. I think that's
I
part of
know.
what Dwayne Johnson wants to do. Like he even said, like there is a possibility of Marvel and DC intersecting at some point. I'm like, I mean, it's becoming that Patton Oswalt thing on Parks and Rec, right?
And I
Where like
know
it
that
all
that's happened in the
connects.
comics. There was a Marvel versus DC comic book, and crazier things have happened, and never say never when they're completely out of ideas, and Marvel Studios starts kind of going down a little bit, then I'm sure something like that will happen. But I think they'll cross over with Star Wars or something before they would cross over with DC. But those are all kind of jumping the shark moments for sure. But I mean, who knows, it could be done well as well. But like, I don't know. Like to me, it's like don't worry about what they were doing. And DC was getting a little bit more interesting when they weren't worried about what Marvel was doing, because they went down this weird rabbit hole of they're like, we need to play catch up, and they always feel like they're. And I hate pitting the two companies against each other. And weirdly, I was more of a DC kid than Marvel kid, other than Spider Man, because like I liked Batman. When I got back into comics, I was reading way more DC comics than Marvel comics, and like, but then the MCU came and kind of flipped, I think, mostly everyone minus Batman, right? Like, and you had those classic comic fans who always loved Superman and things like that. That being said, Dragon Ball, best version of Superman. Watching this movie, did I go, could there
Invincible, better version of Superman, and a
watching this
better anti-hero
and
too.
dude, watching this movie, I thought of those two exact things you just said. I said, wow, a live action Invincible movie could be dope. And then I said, a Dragon Ball live action movie could be done well. Like it could be. And I saw elements of that in here, and just the way technology is advanced, the way that you can have these super powered fights and things like that, where even someone like a Jama could have been fun to direct a Dragon Ball movie, because I feel like he has that weird sense of humor too that could
Liam
work for
Neeson as
that.
Master Roshi, but
So
then you get
like,
the whitewashing
no,
thing though
that
as
I
well, right?
agree. Like where Dragon Ball, I think they're, a lot of the characters are Saiyans. They're not necessarily like you could interpret that however you want, right? But
Right.
certain characters very much are. Yeah, I don't know what about how you would handle that properly if you were going to do another English language like version of Dragon Ball, but like it made this movie at least went, oh, okay, we have the tech now where we could do an Invincible movie live action and it would be dope, and or a Dragon Ball movie, and it could be fun depending on how you handled it. But
It's got to be better
um
than Dragon Ball Evolution.
there's no way it can be worse. So,
No.
anyways, this movie is perfectly okay. It's better than the Zack Snyder stuff just because it's not as up its own ass, and like it's more like it's here's a superhero movie and you kind of get what you expect out of it. And The Rock is The Rock, and he's always charismatic and fun to watch. The movies around him a lot of the times are always just very that 6 to 7.5 out of 10 where you're like they're okay. And he's very consistent. Like he's very, very consistent. And I think he delivers
He's
here.
solid like a rock.
And then the Juame stuff is the stuff that really stands out, but it's kind of just scattered throughout the movie. So I'm going to give the movie a 3 out of 5. I still think it's enjoyable. I think you kind of know what you're going to get with this movie, and you get exactly that. So
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I think that it's above the Zack Snyder directed films. It's a little bit more playful in its personality because of Jean Collet-Serra being a vulgar auteurist, as he has been called online, and interjecting a little bit more personality than what you would come to expect in some of these movies. And it does, like, I just wish that they gave him the complete keys to the kingdom, because it could have been weirder and it could have been funnier
oh,
and it
totally.
could have been more surreal. um but the way that it is now, it's like okay, like this is fine for a first movie, but um you know whether or not there's potential to make a better Black Adam solo sequel, or make a really good Shazam versus Black Adam movie in the future.
You
I
keep
think it's
talking about
all,
that Superman versus Black Adam movie too
yeah,
that they
I
might
think
do.
it's all dependent on who's in control and what the tone is. Like, if the tone works, that it's self-serious, that's fine. Not everything has to be comedic or subversive, or have kind of a social, political, or geopolitical commentary. But for this, it's like, okay, like those moments that kind of break through, it's like those are really good. Like, I want more of that. Like bring me more of that. And there is part of me that thinks that, like, there is untapped potential in The Rock playing a true villain, in the way that, like, again, crappy movie, but Doom, he commits to playing kind of the guy who believes himself to be the hero but is actually
Yeah.
the villain. And he was so good in that role, but since then he's kind of strayed away from that, for the most part. And it's like,
He's a company man, and he's always a people pleaser. He's the
yeah,
people champ. Like he needs to kind of keep that. It's all about image,
we're
right? Like
again, like Dave Batista, we
doesn't
didn't
care
love
about his
Dune, but
image
like I
really.
love that he
Yeah.
takes on the role of the Beast, and he's like, I don't care playing a bad guy, and like,
Oh
like,
no, Dave Bautista rules, but like,
yeah,
and The Rock rules too in a very different way, right?
yeah.
But like,
I
he's
just see
very
there's
much
so
like
much
a
more that we could get from him, and it just feels like,
The
oh,
Rock
like,
feels more like a product, right? Like
yeah,
everything about him, Zoa energy drink, Terramina tequila, or whatever the hell it's called, and like all this stuff. It's very much about like I'm selling myself, I'm selling The Rock, and I have to be this like larger than life, like fun loving, nice personality that like even though he kills people, like it's still very much all that in there. So yeah, it's okay. Like I'm curious of where they go next. That article I go read it because it has some interesting details about what Matt Reeves is trying to do, what James Gunn's doing. They said,
Clayface.
oh, I'm here for it. I don't know what Clayface would look like in that universe. But I'm here for it. And then like they were saying that they were talking to Christopher McQuarrie to maybe do a new Superman movie with Henry Cavill, but like that's not really confirmed that he's like in
Don't make me
talks.
want
It's
to
just
see this movie.
I know that's the thing, man. Like if they get Christopher McQuarrie to do it, I'm like, oh, I'll go see that movie. And like they work together on Mission
Put his
Impossible,
mustache
but
back
like,
on.
yeah, he gives Superman a mustache, which you're already gonna get whenever you get Invincible or
Yeah, might
God,
as well.
have Christopher McQuarrie do the Invincible movie. There we go.
Yeah.
And have Henry Cavill. Never mind. Anyways, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go next. I think you would just get more of the same here. So if you wanted more of the same, you're gonna get what you want. If you wanted something that feels completely different, you're not going to get that. We'll have to see with Aquaman and the Flash and whatever the hell's coming up to see where the DCEU goes. But thank you all for listening. We will have a spoiler cast with some details that we didn't touch on here. Go check that out. That'll be out after Black Adam is out. Go check out our Black Adam Rocks Untitled, which is episode 135 of the Untitled Movie Podcast, where Eric and I talk about the event at the Rec Room, which Eric said should have been called the Rock Room for that night, which is way better.
Missed opportunity.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the march to the theater. We'll talk about our experience in the theater, which we didn't touch on in this review, which definitely was a challenge to sit there as critics and try to watch the movie.
Luckily, it's a loud film, so that does help. And also, it's a movie you don't need to completely know every single detail with the exposition. So,
and Eric and I'm very sensitive when it comes to people around me, to projection, to the overall cinematic experience, I guess. Eric, you don't like it, but you can put up with it a little bit more than I can,
depending on the film.
Yeah. And this, I will tease it here, one of the worst people, or one of the worst experiences I've had at a movie screening in a very long time. And
it's not just one thing as well. Like, this is going to be something where it's like, it is one of also the weirdest experiences I think I've ever had at a movie theater.
And it just somehow, I don't know if it just feels like they always sit 2 seats down from us or what, or maybe we're not noticing stuff that's happening on the other side of the theater, but like just the absolute fucking worst. So go check out episode 135 to hear that story. And we'll also talk about Harrison Ford joining the MCU. What the hell? And as well as the Creed 3 trailer and other things like that. So go check out that episode. We have tons of other stuff that you guys can check out. You can check out our review for Halloween Ends. Eric and I had an awesome conversation, both spoiler free and spoiler filled, over on that review. So go check that out. Super Mario Brothers trailer we talked about in episode 134, The Last of Us in 133. We have tons of reviews for things like Werewolf by Night, Todd Field's Tar, Rosaline, Amsterdam, Don't Worry Darling, all of our TIFF stuff. So head over and check all of that stuff out, whether it's on YouTube, podcast services, or the one-stop shop where you can find everything, which is Letterboxd, which is Untitled_movies. And follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Martin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
They want the crown of Sabak.
Sabak.
Sabak.